Good afternoon, everybody. I guess it's still morning on the West Coast, so good morning to West Coasters. This is Ken Brown. I'm with Transportation Energy Partners in Washington, D.C., and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar. We are going to do a couple of things today. We're going to talk, give you a little background on Transportation Energy Partners. We are going to give you an update on what's going on in Washington and what the outlook is for clean fuels and clean vehicles in the coming year. And we're going to talk a little bit about how, in particular, Clean Cities coalitions can play an active role in Transportation Energy Partners, and how we need you to be active participants in the effort to educate our elected officials around the country. So welcome, everybody. Let's see, I'm going to go to the next slide here. There we go. A quick thank you to all of our sponsors of Transportation Energy Partners and our Energy Independence Summit. We appreciate all of your support, and we could not do all of our work without you. So thank you to our sponsors. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam Spoffworth. Sam is the president of Transportation Energy Partners. I'm sure most of you know Sam. He's also the executive director of Clean Fuels Ohio and has many years of experience in the Clean Cities movement. And Sam's going to get us going with some background on Transportation Energy Partners. So thanks, Sam. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Ken, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to provide some background about Transportation Energy Partners, talk a little bit about the summit, and then hand it back off to Ken and to Philip. So first of all, TEP is a national organization that provides policy support to the nation's Clean Cities coalitions and about 15,000 stakeholders that we collectively have across the country. So the organization keeps all of us informed about key policies and programs and funding opportunities. And then we also do a lot of education work. Fundamentally, TEP is an education organization, a 501c3, and we educate decision makers about the importance of advancing these markets. And we provide various forms of coalition support, and we need coalition involvement to be effective as an organization. So how coalitions can participate, we really need your participation. Number one, just to build relationships with your elected officials, to do so both in the district and then also by engaging with their staff and members in DC, educating them about the importance of cleaner fuels and vehicles, and then get your stakeholders involved. That may be among the most important things that you can do, and we've found that to be especially effective in my organization. Is to make the connections between fleet and industry and other stakeholders and these elected officials. And then, of course, attending the summit itself, that's real important. We really hope to have our best year ever in 2019 in terms of participation from coordinators and stakeholders. I'm very optimistic that this is going to be a great year. And then to become a TEP member, that certainly is also very important. Specifically about the summit, it is February 11th through the 13th. You can register now. The registration is open. Hotel registration is open as well. The early bird rates still are fully applying, so this is a great time to get involved. You can see there the kind of participation and content that we have in terms of the plenary session we do is a day-long session on the 11th. And then, on the 12th, we're up on Capitol Hill, educating members and educating their staffs. And then we have the reception at the UPS Capitol Hill Townhouse, which is tremendous fun, as well as being great networking. And then we have our meetings with agencies on the 13th. So just recently, and I'll try to keep this brief, but TEP has been very active. We worked with Congress to prevent the proposed elimination of clean cities. I think hopefully everyone has heard by now the role that TEP played in that process, where the administration and the House were going to zero out the Clean Cities program, or nearly zero it out. TEP got involved and built upon the relationships and work that we've done. We've worked the appropriations committees, again, long story on that, but we were able to not only avoid elimination, but actually get a small increase. I firmly believe that this would not have happened had it not been for this organization and all of you and others that supported the efforts. In addition to that, we work with Congress to increase the appropriations for the EPA's clean diesel program, extending the alternative fuels tax incentives, preserving the Renewable Fuel Standard, and also working with the DOT, and this work continues, working with the DOT and Federal Highway to break up the logjam on the Buy America issues with the CMAQ programs impacting so many projects across the country. TEP, in terms of working with the DOE, I mean, TEP is increasingly working hand in hand with the DOE as a partner in terms of increasing support for coalitions. We've initiated a series of meetings with the DOE. Most recent one was in early October. Extremely productive dialogue we had with DOE headquarters staff, particularly Michael Barabay. We've developed a proposal for FY19 that the DOE, we had a great dialogue around that, so this relationship is really building with the DOE. Next slide. Okay. So again, this proposal to the DOE is really a focus on, maybe go back a slide. Possibly. I was going to say it's really to focus on furthering the deployment, and deployment, that term defined very broadly, to include actual deployment of technology, but also education, demonstration, the collection of data, which is so critical for Clean Cities coalitions to serve as this feedback loop for the DOE around R&D and really bringing that to market. We really are also encouraging the DOE to invest in enhancing the effectiveness of all Clean Cities coalitions and meeting the program's objectives. And encourage them to maintain, and I believe we've been successful, maintaining support around the broad historic portfolio of fuels and technologies, as well as embracing a lot of the smart mobility and the EAMS efforts. And then, just to continue to increase the direct support from the DOE for coalitions. I think we heard a lot about that at the peer exchange. We've had those conversations from a TEP standpoint as well. And to make sure that the deliverables, as part of our proposal to the DOE, was to make sure that the deliverables were flexible to adapt to local priorities, local needs, and the capabilities of coalitions to fulfill those needs. So again, the deployment or the proposal from TEP to the DOE, this is the part that focused in on the competitive deployment grants. And so the funding opportunity announcement that we anticipate, we have provided some specific guidance. We had a lot of good dialogue with the DOE at the October 5th meeting that was earlier referenced about this. Again, I mean, they were not at liberty, nor was it appropriate to share a lot of details about their own thinking there. But we really had an opportunity to provide a lot of input into that, and we're really encouraging of the DOE to again, focus on a broad range of fuels and technologies, and to focus on this opportunity to deploy, demonstrate, educate, which is what we're really good at doing. And again, to continue, in addition to the competitive grants, we're really encouraging the DOE to invest in the capacity building and the technical capabilities of coalitions. So the mentoring program, the internship program, really featured there. To finalize the 2016 and 2017 program metrics reports as soon as possible. Update publications that are the most valuable. To continue to focus on opportunities through the Tiger teams for the Alternative Fuels Data Center to provide this kind of support that we need. So is that the technical capacity, we really also emphasize that. And in terms of ongoing communications, we expect and have proposed that we will be able to have regular check-ins, calls, meetings with the DOE. We propose quarterly calls with the DOE, TEP leadership, as well as representatives from the Clean Cities Coordinator Council. So we really have that ongoing dialogue. I think as everyone who attended the peer exchange knows, there was a robust dialogue there. And we also expect the DOE to participate as they have, but perhaps even at a higher level in the TEP Energy Independence Summit. And so we're looking forward to that. And is aware, the DOE has indicated that they are going to increase opportunities for coalition support funding. I think they have heard us. We obviously do not yet know what the decisions are regarding the competitive grants, but I would say it this way, we feel like our message was definitely heard on that. And they have also committed to the regular communication that I spoke about. The future, and I'm not sure this is where Philip or Ken take over, or is it still me? I'm looking to see the slide count here.
This is me, Sam.
Okay, I'm going to turn things back over to Ken, and he's going to talk about the policy issues.
Thanks, Sam. I just want to underscore, I think, how important these meetings that TEP initiated with the DOE over the starting last spring, and with one of the bases being that there was some concern amongst a number of coalitions that we were working hard to increase the funding, and we wanted to see more of the funding invested in efforts of the coalitions to really support the program. We, as Sam said, these discussions with DOE have been extremely constructive and productive, and we're optimistic over the next year that the program will really focus on deployment, number one, and number two, really look to strengthen the partnerships with the coalitions as we move forward. So thank you, Sam. And thanks to all the people, all the coalitions that in TEP and others that participated in that effort. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on here in Washington, D.C., and our priorities for the coming year, so that you all can be prepared to be actively engaged with us. Just big picture, I would say that the federal policies and programs still remain, there's a bit of volatility and some uncertainty. just in terms of the big picture for some of the programs and priorities. I think it's likely that the administration will continue to propose cuts to clean energy programs. Our hope is that, as happened during the past year, the Congress will jump in, because we've developed through our work over the years very good bipartisan support in Congress, that they will help protect the programs working closely with us. I think, as everybody knows, the Democrats have now taken back control of the House, while at the same time the Senate gained a few seats. The Republicans gained a few seats. So we're going to see, I think we're going to see more bipartisan governing. I think that has good news and bad news. Basically the good news is I think there will be, it will be harder to push through any major sort of negative changes impacting the programs that we care about. And at the same time, there's likely to be continued gridlock over many things. Another thing just to pay attention to is that the budget negotiations are likely to be somewhat tricky and uncertain for next year. During the past 2 years of the budget cycle, there was a broad agreement between the administration, the House, and the Senate that included Democrats and Republicans on the overall budget numbers, which made it easier to get the appropriations bills done. That budget agreement does not hold for the next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 2020. So they're going to have to ultimately negotiate new numbers, and we'll just have to see how that works. But in the meantime, I anticipate that with our work and your efforts to help us, that we will maintain strong support. And I think there's some possibility that we could see some infrastructure legislation in the next, sometime during the next year. But we'll have to wait and see on that. In terms of transportation energy partners, federal priorities for the coming year: one is to extend the tax incentives. Two is to continue to fight to maintain and increase funding for the Clean Cities program and the diesel emission reduction grants, to preserve the Renewable Fuel Standard, to continue to work with the Federal Highway Administration to get them to move clean vehicle projects forward, especially ones that are currently stuck, and to include alternative fuels in any new infrastructure initiatives. Also, I want to, before I go to the next slide, I want to remind folks, if you have any questions, please just type them into your question box, and we'll do our best to answer them. In terms of the federal tax incentives, last year, at the end of last year, Congress was able to push an extension, a retroactive extension through 2017, but the incentives were not extended through 2018. So we are still in a situation where the incentives are expired and need to be extended both retroactively for 2018 and forward at least through 2019. Just to review quickly, the final tax reform bill that was passed last January did maintain the electric vehicle tax credit, but it did not include the expired incentives, so it did not extend them through 2018. The outlook is, I would say cautiously optimistic. There's good bipartisan support. A bipartisan bill to extend the expired incentives has been introduced in the House. There's going to be an effort, I don't know if it will be successful or not, to attach the incentives to the FY 2019 appropriations bill that hopefully will get done in December. And our efforts and your efforts need to continue to focus on House and Senate leadership and the leadership of the tax committee and the tax committee members. I'm sure people know there are some who are looking to repeal the electric vehicle tax credit. I think now with the Democrats in charge of the House, I think that will be much more difficult to accomplish. And I think in general, I think the Democratic leadership in the House should help with the tax incentive extensions if they don't get done in December. Here are the key leaders, likely key leaders next year. Obviously, these haven't been finalized. It looks like we're going to get a new chairman in the Senate, probably Orrin Hatch, who was from Utah, who was the previous chairman, has retired, and it's likely to be Charles Grassley from Iowa, who was a former Senate Finance Committee chair. And then the leadership of the House is now going to be flipped, and it looks like Richard Neal, who's a Democrat, will now be the chair, and Kevin Brady, the former chair, will be the likely ranking member on the House Ways and Means Committee. In terms of the Renewable Fuel Standard, we've been supportive of the industry efforts. They've been able to, groups like the National Biodiesel Board and the Renewable Natural Gas Coalition have been very active in getting the program back on track, and the numbers have been finalized through 2019 for the various fuels and through 2020 for biodiesel. I do want to point out that some in the oil industry reduce the effectiveness of the program, so we need to remain vigilant there. In terms of our funding priorities, again, Clean Cities and the EPA Clean Diesel grants are our highest priorities. In terms of the current fiscal year, which started on October 1st, this has been the first year where, in a long time, where the DOE budget got done early. I think actually before the end of the fiscal year. So DOE actually has a budget already in place for fiscal year 2019, which is amazing. And as we discussed, there's $37.8 million for the Clean Cities program there. And our conversations with DOE were our recommendations in part on how to, priorities for using those funds. In terms of the EPA Clean Diesel grants, the EPA spending bill is one of the bills that has not yet been approved and is under a continuing resolution, which is basically temporary commitment to keep spending funding at last year's levels, and that currently there's an agreement to keep funding the government at last year's levels through December 21st, and Congress is busily, and the administration are negotiating, hopefully to wrap that up. And in terms of the outlook for the EPA Clean Diesel program, looks like we'll probably end up, my guess is somewhere around last year's level, which is $75 million, because there's $100 million in the House version and $50 million in the Senate version. In terms of the budget appropriations process, looking forward, the president will, for FY 2020, the president will propose his budget in early February. The appropriations subcommittees will consider their legislation, which is really the key step in the process, probably beginning in April and through May. There will be House and Senate floor action in the summer, and hopefully final legislation approved sometime in the fall. Here's some of the key appropriations leaders. And then in terms of our role, and we'll be organized to really aggressively pursue the funding increases we're seeking during Energy Independence Summit in February. But we need everybody at the Energy Independence Summit, and we'll be talking more about this as we get closer to February and while people are here. But the key part of the process is that each member of the House and the Senate has the ability to send a letter to each appropriation subcommittee with their individual preferences for priority funding of programs. And so our goal is to get all the House and Senate members, as many as we can, to include the Clean Cities program and the EPA diesel emission reduction grants in their letters to the subcommittees. So, and each member usually has a time schedule for accepting requests from their constituents and stakeholders, and that deadline is usually for their individual office requests, usually are in late February or early March. And so what we need to do is find out those deadlines, get our requests into each of the members' office, get your coalition stakeholder support behind you, and then follow up with each of the congressional offices to encourage them to submit your requests. And this is a very important part of the process. We've been doing this for several years, and it's really helped to make the critical difference in getting funding increased, because it shows that individual members of Congress care about and want to prioritize these programs. Other issues that we're tracking, again, and we'll be talking about at the Energy Independence Summit, and also on our Capitol Hill Day visits, the Federal Highway Administration, I think, as people know, has put on hold funding, CMAQ funding for alternative fuel vehicles because of Buy America issues. Folks may recall that TEP was involved working with NGV America and others to break the logjam. We had a similar problem during the Obama administration, and we worked with the FHWA and their general counsel to break that logjam and come up with a process where DOT would approve waivers of vehicles on a quarterly basis, vehicle projects, funding for vehicle projects, as long as those vehicles had final assembly in the U.S. And then when the new administration came in, the Trump administration, they're concerned about Buy America issues as well. So they put the program on hold. Then we got them to approve some projects that were submitted in 2016 and early 2017 that were stuck. So they approved those, but they have stalled any projects submitted after the first quarter of 2017. So we're working hard to try and break that logjam. Again, it's possible that infrastructure legislation is out there, and we'll look to include alternative energy measures and infrastructure legislation, and also if any energy legislation does move, we'll look to include things there as well. So again, what we need from you all is your help, and our strategy moving forward is to continue to educate the new administration, work with your members of Congress to educate them, rally your stakeholders, and make sure that your voices are heard by your policymakers in your states and your localities, And then again, we just want to encourage you strongly. We're looking to get every coalition across the country represented at the Energy Independence Summit. So, and to have you bring your stakeholders. If you, as a coordinator or staff member, are unable to attend, we ask you to work to get your board members or your stakeholders to come, because it's really the broader representation we have, the more effective we're going to be in continuing to maintain support and progress for these programs and priorities. So with that, I am going to take a quick look at the question box to see if we have any questions. I see some questions here. I'm going to take a couple questions and then I'm going to pass it on to Philip. As the US EPA verifies, certifies vehicles, what is TEP doing to work with EPA to advance these types of vehicles? Sam or Philip, you want to take a crack at that question?
I can take a crack at it, Ken, and maybe Philip, if there's anything he might want to add. I guess the short answer is TEP as an organization, we have not had ongoing dialogue with US EPA over the verification certification process. We do meet with EPA personnel at the summit every year. And I think that presents an opportunity. I know this is an issue that we have, you know, in my organization in Ohio, that we've dealt with and have been somewhat frustrated by. And I'd add to that the diesel emission quantifier tool. I'd add that to a set of issues that we've been frustrated by. So I think it's a good point, something that we can talk about, and would welcome any support in order to engage US EPA on that.
And I will say that we have had some discussions with, you know, vehicles that are, you know, that are either seeking to be verified or newly verified. And then we do, you know, at the Energy Independence Summit, if there are new technologies or if there are vehicles or companies that participate in the summit, we're always open to looking for ways to promote and advance new types of vehicles and fuels. So we encourage, if anybody has ideas or contacts with companies who want to, you know, who want to advance certain technologies and vehicles, we're very open to having discussions about how best to do that in conjunction with the Energy Independence Summit and our ongoing programs. Another question was, will these, can people get a copy of the slides? And the answer is both this recording and the slides will be posted on our website, which is www.transportationenergypartners.org. Let's see, what else do we have here? What is meant by clean diesel program? That's the EPA diesel emission reduction grants, also sometimes known as the Clean Diesel Program. And let's take one more now. Somebody wants the last slide back up. I can do that, especially while I'm talking here. That's the wrong way. Let's see. Here's a question. Will a brief one-pager summarizing these top issues described be made available sooner than later so that we can share with our stakeholders as part of an invite? That's a great idea. And yes, we will do that. We will prepare a one-pager or a draft letter that you all can use to invite your stakeholders, and we'll get that to you by next week. Good question. And then here's another 2 questions. I'm going to give this one to Philip, which is, how will the Green New Deal concept that's being proposed integrate with our priorities and funding asks? And then a related question is, will you push for zero emission and electric, medium, and heavy duty trucks contained in your summit, in your incentive recommendations? Philip, you want to take a crack at that?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
That's all right.
First of all, I have to admit I'm not familiar with what the Green Deal, specifics of the Green Deal that you're talking about.
Yeah, Philip, this is Sam. It's the Democrats in the House, this part of their platform that they're looking to pursue is a kind of a Green Deal. So a lot of advanced energy investments and various types of things like that to kind of tie beneficial technologies like this into economic development and jobs. Is essentially. I'm probably butchering it, but I think that's the idea.
Well, conceptually, certainly those kinds of policies conform to and are consistent with the types of policies that TEP has advocated for in terms of clean technologies and the jobs that are associated with it. And I think it's very important on both sides of the aisle to emphasize that these technologies do create jobs. I think that's always a tremendously important and effective way to draw support for the policy position that you're advocating for, is to tie it back to jobs. That's very important. And then specifically on the medium and heavy duty electric vehicles, I know some things have been discussed. I don't know that there have been specific proposals, but again, as an organization, TEP has always been supportive of incentives that help to advance the markets for all alternative technologies and advanced technology vehicles. And so we would certainly always have to see the specifics of it, but I would suspect that we would be supportive of those types of incentives.
Thanks, Philip. Here are 2 other questions. One, is TEP advocating a position on proposed changes to the CAFE standards?
And Ken, I could answer that unless anyone else. I
Sure.
Do not believe that TEP has an official position on CAFE. For example, there's been some legislation introduced called the Natural Gas Parity Act, which is an effort to provide some of the same CAFE credit benefits to natural gas vehicles for CAFE purposes as electric vehicles currently enjoy. And I know that that particular proposal, that TEP does not have a position. I will say that my organization is supportive of that legislation. But I think that's something else that that CAFE and battling back against efforts to weaken CAFE is certainly something that TEP should be taking. I mean, I would say is something that the board would have to decide upon, but I think would be consistent with TEP's mission.
Thank you, Sam.
Let me just add.
Go ahead.
Let me just add to that, please. One thing about the CAFE, the proposal that the Trump administration has put forth is the one thing that is certain is there will be litigation, and that will take it's not going to be an easy path to alter the CAFE standards, and it's more likely to be cited by the courts than it will be by Congress weighing in on it at this time. And in fact, Congress will most likely not weigh in on it from a policy standpoint unless there's a bad court decision.
All right, and this one's for you, Sam. When we think of supporting Clean Cities program objectives, do we have clear and concise understanding of how the energy efficiency and mobility systems stuff and smart mobility component interplays with traditional Clean Cities focus areas? And the answer, and the follows up specifically so we can communicate clearly with our congressional contacts during our visits and later on back in our regions. So the answer is, we're gonna have a session on this at the summit. But Sam, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I think that will be helpful.
Yeah, I think the session will be helpful. I think, for those, again, I think most coordinators attended the peer exchange. I personally found the dialogue and the presentations on EAMS at the peer exchange to be helpful, instructive, I would say. I mean, I think what I believe I know at this point is, I guess, speaking personally, is that the DOE has decided, this decision has been made, that they are going to invest resources. They have been investing resources into this. They expect there to be, they're not going to require, but they're anticipating that many Clean Cities coalitions will embrace this. It's going to be reflected in the coalition support contract specifically. So I think that train has left the station, and the DOE is going to be doing this, and they are going to be looking to enlist the involvement of Clean Cities coalitions and stakeholders in the effort. What those kind of projects look like, I mean, I think that's still to be defined and determined, and is a work in progress about what exactly that means specifically. But I don't think there's any question that this is where the DOE is headed. But I would also say it doesn't mean that the DOE is simultaneously abandoning the traditional fuels and technologies. I don't believe that they're doing that. I think this is just adding to the plate, which makes it a certainly more crowded plate.
Great, thanks. All right, with that, let's take the last few minutes. I'm going to turn it over to Philip Wiedmeyer. I think most of you know Philip. He's the chair of the Alabama Clean Fuels Coalition, and he's also the vice president of Transportation Energy Partners. And he's going to talk a little bit about getting ready for the Energy Independence Summit and how to be most effective with your visits at the summit. So Philip, let me see if I can cue you up with some slides here.
There you go. Ken, thank you. And hello, everyone. Let me first thank you for taking time to participate in this webinar today. And while this is titled Preparing for Capitol Hill Day, it can be used back at home in your district, in and not only with members of Congress, but other elected officials too. All the principles that I'll briefly go over are applicable in any of those situations. So I think it's been demonstrated from what Ken and Sam have told you already about the accomplishments that TEP and through our collective efforts with coalitions and industry have made in terms of funding and priorities, policy priorities, that it becomes pretty obvious why it's important to educate policymakers. Certainly, it helps to build your organization by increasing your visibility. More members that you get involved can result in more funding for your organization. And the biggest impact is that you get to impact the debate on the policies and make your voice heard. And finally, it helps you to build long-term relationships, and that is the cash of politics, as they say. Next slide. Relationships are the currency of policy making, not only in Washington, but across the country too. And it would be practical thing you can do is to identify ways that your organization can help an elected official. First of all, by being a good source of ideas and information. They have 1,000 issues that they have to learn about, both the staff and the members. And they really value good, credible, concise information about those issues. And so if you become a subject matter expert, so to speak, with them, that helps to build the relationship with your organization and that member. Another thing you can do is provide them opportunity to get visibility and media coverage. If you're doing a press event in your coalition around any of the alternative fuel things, invite them or their staff to attend or to speak. That is important to those members. Also, you can certainly introduce them to key constituents that they may not have a relationship with, that are stakeholders in your organization, and other community leaders. That's of value to them also. And you should do this not only with congressional members, but your local and state officials also. Next slide. The old saying is all politics is local. So it's important to educate them about what specifically is going on in your area, in the area of clean transportation. Provide them facts and figures on how the clean vehicles and fuels are helping to create jobs and benefiting the local area. And TEP can assist you by giving you some examples of what other coalitions around the country, how they package and present that information in a concise and effective manner. And TEP is be glad to provide those examples of how coalitions highlight local projects and programs that are making the difference. And it's always helpful to demonstrate that you have broad-based and bipartisan support for your issue. I mean, don't make it a Republican or a Democrat thing. It's good for your state, your coalition area. It's good for the country. Next slide, please. After you've met with an elected official, it's important that you do follow up and follow through. You're likely to get many questions from them. If you don't know the answer to those questions, tell them that you will find the answer and get back to them. Personal handwritten thank you notes are always effective in relationship building, either on a personal or professional level, and certainly with members of Congress, that's important. Stay in touch with them. Don't make this just a relationship is a one-time deal during Energy Independence Summit. Stay in touch with them throughout the year. Put them on your email distribution, your newsletter list. Provide updates to the staff when you do a press release. Make sure that they get that they hear it from you, that they don't read it in the newspaper. Give them advance information on that. And as I mentioned earlier, invite them to your local events and try to include them in any opportunities where you are getting media coverage for your projects and activities. Next slide. Somebody mentioned a one-pager. Well, you need a one-pager when you go in to sit down with them to talk about the background on your organization and examples of projects. And as I mentioned, TEP can provide you with some effective examples of how to organize that information. Visual displays, if you can bring in charts and graphs, picture is always worth 1,000 words and can be effective. Make sure you bring enough business cards, pens, and papers for your meeting. Keep your cell phones on vibrate or silent. Don't allow for an interruption to take place at a critical moment in your meeting. And on Capitol Hill, you will be walking a lot, so make sure that going from the House and the Senate and all the 6 congressional office buildings, make sure you have comfortable shoes on. A few tips, just be brief and to the point. Your meeting will typically last 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 30. And make sure during your presentation that you do leave a time for questions from the people you're meeting with. And you might not always get to meet with the member. Most cases you will be meeting with the member staff. Focus on your specific request for actions. It's good if you got a one-pager that has your policy requests that you're interested in, and let them know how they can help. Especially if they serve on a particular committee, whether it's an appropriations committee or an authorizing committee, let them know specifically what they can do. Ken mentioned earlier about finding out on the appropriations process, and this applies to all members. Find out whether they have a form that they want filled out, or just a letter to make the request from. Be up to date on your facts. Don't try to BS them. If you have to bring some notes to help you through the meeting, that's fine. It always is impressive and adds to your credibility if you present both sides of an issue. And on every issue, there are always pros and cons. So you verbalizing those increases your credibility with that office. And most of all, be respectful. They're not going to agree with you 100% of the time, just like you don't agree with your wife or your brothers and sisters 100% of the time. But you should be respectful, and you will have an opportunity to work together, maybe not on this issue, but on the next issue. Next slide. And as I mentioned, TEP is available to provide you assistance on Capitol Hill Day during EIS. We can help organize and build teams with stakeholders who have economic interest in your particular area. We can help with scheduling the meetings with the offices, and you need to start on that early. Don't wait till the week before, because their schedules will be full. I would say now is not too early to start working on scheduling congressional office visit meetings. We'll provide, as Ken has mentioned, some sample request letters on appropriations, and talking points and handouts too. If you would interested in a local press release, we can provide you samples of those too, that that you're going to be meeting with the congressional delegation and send out a press release on that. TEP is available to assist you with that. Next slide. Any questions?
Thank you, Philip. Anybody have any final questions? So I guess I just want to underscore that how important your involvement and having as many Clean Cities coalitions involved as possible in the Energy Independence Summit is, and encourage. We really want representatives again from all coalitions in Washington this year, and to bring your stakeholders as well. We have a great opportunity there are a lot of new members, a couple of new senators, and a lot of new House members who were here. Excuse my dog barking in the background. There are a lot of new members to educate and build relationships with, so that's a real opportunity. And it's a real opportunity to network with folks across the country, to meet folks from the various federal agencies, learn the latest and greatest about their programs, and build relationships with the people who are running those programs, not only at DOE, but also at EPA and Transportation and Department of Agriculture and other agencies. So thanks to everybody for participating. Let's see. If you do have questions, here's my contact information. And again, we'll have the slides and the recording up on our website in the next couple of days. And if you have any, and you can register for the summit at www.transportationenergypartners.org. So with that, seeing no more questions and having been on for about an hour, I just want to thank everybody. Special thanks to Sam and Philip for helping to lead this and providing such good information. And we hope to see everybody at the upcoming summit.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again, everybody.
Have a good day, y'all.